So hello again, this is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. A couple of, let's say, housekeeping issues, and then I'd just like to talk for a few minutes here about due process. So thanks everybody for all your attention. We really appreciate it, certainly on the escrow matter and anything else. We know that you're watching. Everything's up, and we really appreciate all those numbers, all those views, all that interest in what's going on here in Wisconsin, but also the Constitution and the civil rights issues that we're covering here, generally speaking. So I appreciate all that, and I know all of the whistleblowers, the clients, the plaintiffs here also appreciate your attention as well. It's a hard fight, and there's nothing like having some feedback on that. So I appreciate that. I want to also talk today about, I think we've gotten quite a good deal down the road of the First Amendment, and I think the Fifth Amendment, we've got a lot of focus on that. A lot of what my practice centers around is due process. So the due process clause in the Constitution says, and this is a part of the Fifth Amendment here, but it says that nobody will be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So the 14th Amendment also incorporates that. That's here really where I stand on that. The 14th Amendment incorporating the due process clause as onto the states, that's where I come in. And the reason where I come in on that in so many cases here in Wisconsin is about 10 years ago, there was a vast, and I think conspiracy is the right word, it's well documented, to remove union protections here in the state of Wisconsin. So whatever you may think of unions, or union individuals individually, or anything else, the fact remains, and I think this is scientifically proven, that unions improve working conditions. And one of the ways that they do that is by formally implementing extra steps of due process with a contract with their employer. So that usually is the goal there, besides working wages. When we're talking about working conditions, we're really talking about putting in place due process checks that can be contractually enforced on the employer. In this case here, because the employer is the government employees also have protections from the Constitution, including due process rights. So when there are no union rights, all that really is left are due process rights. And here in Wisconsin anyway, I think many people, many municipalities, many employees have kind of forgotten that those rights existed because we have been dealing for so long on a much higher level that it's when you're up on the clouds, it's sort of easy to forget where the floor is. So that is a trend that I've seen here, and that's a lot of what when people call on me, that's part of what they need. If they call on me earlier enough, we will get into this process. So if you see here the Levasseur hearings, all of that is a due process hearing, meaning the sheriff in that case says, I'm going to terminate you. She challenges that decision, and a higher authority still within the county or the city or whatever is going to review that decision, and it's that decision that ultimately becomes the final decision. So you can see that whole process all the way through in Levasseur, but that's also what's going on in Amory as well. Ms. Escrow is challenging the decision of Police Chief Hainsel to terminate her, and the Common Council there is hearing her challenge to that. The city has set up its own particular rules. You'll note how they're different than the rules in Ashland County there for Levasseur. I mean, I think that in itself is pretty problematic, but just having so many varying standards there, you're going to have it's going to be really hard to apply those standards because nobody's really going to be that sure what they are. That was definitely the case in Levasseur there. Nobody was really sure what no rational reason to terminate her really meant. Certainly the person who was holding the hearing didn't know that, and the county people didn't know that as well. So when then we talk about the First Amendment, we talk about the right to have free speech. When we talk about the Fifth Amendment, we're really talking about primarily speaking, the right not to incriminate yourself or to have the government force you to incriminate itself by some use of its governmental power. Well, when you work for the government still has power over you here. That's coming out in the escrow case. So although outside of her employment she's got the right of free speech, inside of her employment, if the government understands or learns that she's using her free speech in a way that it doesn't like, then the government here can retaliate against her. That power is fairly clear. Anna has been naked and open for hundreds of years, and it really until some smart lawyer out there realized that the due process clause forbade local governments from doing that. We had basically naked and open retaliation by government employers. So, I mean, it's not to say that that's clearly an Amory anyway. That's still happening. I think it's way beyond Amory, but that's what's going on. They just happen to be caught on tape. So here I want to be clear. When somebody has the right to due process right, ultimately what that means is that you have the right to say, no, I can challenge this decision until you can come back and show me that you have asked the right questions, given me the chance to respond, and made a decision based on my responses and both sides of the argument and whatever the government's saying. And so many times that just doesn't happen. So it's when it's my job to get in there and to say, A, first of all, you need to have a hearing like this. And then B, when there is a hearing, it's my job to show why this decision is wrong. Now, I want to be clear here. If the chief had just said, I don't like her because of her skin color, right, that would have been illegal too. And he couldn't have said for no reason at all. And the reason that is because it's the government. They have to have some kind of rational basis to make their decisions. So if you work at Wendy's or Walmart or some other private employer, the mantra is that they can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, except an illegal reason. Okay, well, that is, in my opinion, not the case for the government. The government doesn't have that option of no reason at all. So because they have no reason, they can't have no reason at all, they have to come up with some reason. And usually it's the false reason. At least when I get involved, the reason that they're saying is false. So ultimately the due process clause of the Constitution, we'll say not forces, but incentivizes dishonest government actors to lie about government employees when they're terminating them. Why? Again, because they have to come up with some reason to terminate them. And it's easier to come up with a lie than to admit that the real reason you're doing it is because they're black or because they spoke out against you or because they're gay or from some other protected reason. And so that is the thing that I want to point out here, that due process really is, it's the glue that holds all of the other rights together. If the rights were virtues, it would be courage. Because again, without courage, you don't have any of the other virtues. You can't exercise, intelligence. You can't exercise grace. You can't exercise anything unless you've got the courage to do those things. You can't exercise your First Amendment rights if you don't have the courage to use them. But really, you can't defend your First Amendment rights if you don't have the due process clause in place there to say, hey, the government has to not only, if the government wants to do something to you, they've got to come up with a good reason, and they've got to state that reason. And that in itself is sometimes too difficult for the government to do, and then that's, again, is where attorneys come in and argue that. So, that's what we do here, and that's my highlight of the due process clause, and why I think everybody should, while they're focusing on this July 4th holiday, the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment, all of these rights here that are we hold so dear, let's not forget this right that makes it all the rest possible here. So again, the government cannot deprive one of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. And it's that concept right there that stands between us and tyranny here. So thank you. Have a wonderful 4th, and stick with us. We'll keep you informed.